Wales, and by the end of the night, cloudy skies and some spells of rain reach Cornwall. But elsewhere, further southeast, well, we'll keep the clear spells, and as a result, it's a bit of a chilly start once again on Wednesday, 5 to, well, 2 Celsius in places. But a bright start in the southeast and east of England. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud, a mild start today, but a wet start, especially through the central belt into southwest Scotland. That rain doesn't last too long. By lunchtime, it's cleared much of Scotland. Brighter skies follow here, but it pushes into northern England, western England and Wales. Turns more showery, but cloudy and dull afternoon here. And to the southeast again, well, actually, it's a bright day to come after a chilly start with 15, 16, perhaps 17 Celsius. We do see the cloud and some showers push through here during Thursday early hours, but that will tend to peter out. And by dawn on Thursday, well, most places are clear once again, and it's going to be chilly across some parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. A bright start, though, for many. Light winds, blue skies first thing. However, it doesn't last long. We're going to see the clouds once again build towards the west and southwest. Outbreaks of rain start to spread in, and for the second half of Thursday, many places will turn cloudy and wet. The winds then pick up. Friday's a windy day with blustery showers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, this show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking today. And following another Bank of England intervention, Labour have gone on the attack today, saying the Tories have crashed the economy. Have they? Really? What does it feel like to you? Tell me. And despite pledging to save it, Doncaster Sheffield Airport is set to close. Many up north are saying this shows that levelling up is simply a slogan. Does it really? Or is it just simple business economics? And they're often paid very little, often expected to travel between jobs without a penny's pay. And, of course, we sacked a load of them over the COVID vaccines. Who am I talking about? Carers, of course. So I'm asking, do you think we value our carers enough? We'll have all that to come and more, but first, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. Buckingham Palace has revealed the King's coronation will take place next May, falling on the birthday of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's son, Archie. Charles's grandson turns 4 on May the 6th next year, when the King will also be crowned in Westminster Abbey. More than 2,000 people are set to fill the church to watch the coronation of both the King and the Queen Consort. In other news today, the Chancellor of the Exchequer says he remains committed to measures set out in his recent mini-budget, despite further intervention from the Bank of England today. The central bank has been busy buying more government debt today, having warned of a further risk to the UK's financial stability. Facing questions in the Commons, Kwasi Kwarteng described the current package of support for households and businesses as strong. He also refused calls from his own party to streamline spending on HS2 and Quangos and instead lower taxes for small businesses.
Consider the measures we've already introduced. National insurance hikes have been reversed, corporation tax rise has been scrapped, and the annual investment allowance remains at £1 million. These are measures which small businesses up and down the land have been very, very appreciative of.
Well, a leading economic think tank estimates that the Chancellor has to cut £60 billion of spending if he wants to convince investors that he can get public finances back under control. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the shortfall is a consequence of measures announced since Liz Truss became Prime Minister. Deputy Prime Minister Therese Coffey refused to reveal if the government plans to cut public spending.
I'm very conscious that with our plan for growth, we're seeking to grow the economy. But of course, we want to have sensible fiscal discipline too. But I can't say right now exactly how the overall picture will look. But I'm confident we will continue to see increasing investment in public sector services, but making sure that we do that carefully with taxpayers' money while we also stimulate the economy to grow.
Therese Coffey. International news, and the Prime Minister says G7 leaders will not waver in their resolve to help Ukraine achieve peace. The comment comes after President Volodymyr Zelensky joined Liz Truss and other heads of state to discuss the recent series of Russian attacks on Ukraine. In a statement, the leaders condemned Moscow for targeting civilians, saying it amounted to a war crime. Meanwhile, NATO's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has urged Putin to back down.
President Putin is failing in Ukraine. His attempted annexations, partial mobilization and reckless nuclear rhetoric represents the most significant escalation since the start of the war. NATO stands with Ukraine for as long as it takes. President Putin started this war. He must end it.
The prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has been charged with several sexual offences allegedly committed in Portugal. German prosecutors are accusing Christian Bruckner of 5 offences allegedly committed between 2000 and 2017. The charges are not linked to the McCann case. Officials in Portugal initially identified him as a suspect in Madeleine's disappearance in June 2020. They believe the 45-year-old killed her after abducting her from her family's holiday apartment in 2007. The Scottish Government has told the Supreme Court it's in the public interest to resolve the issue of whether or not Holyrood can hold a second referendum on Scottish independence. Scotland's top law officer put forward the case for a second independence referendum without the support of Westminster. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she wants to be able to hold the vote in October next year. However, the UK government says the bill is at too early a stage for the court to rule on it. In Ireland, funerals are being held for the victims of Friday's service station explosion in County Donegal. A memorial service for 24-year-old designer Jessica Gallagher has been taking place at St Michael's Church. Jessica was one of 10 people killed in the suspected gas blast. Ireland's police force, the Garda, believe it was a tragic accident. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, you're with GB News. Now it's time for Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that. Well, keeping me company right through with you until 7 o'clock tonight is my panel. We've got the former Tory MEP and now live peer in the House of Lords, Jacqueline Foster, and Kevin Craig, the CEO of the PLMR Communications Agency. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
Hi. And you know the drill already on Dewbs & Co, don't you? It's not just about us here and our thoughts, it's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? What do you think? To the things that we're going to be talking about, I want to talk to you about the economy, levelling up, Doncaster Sheffield airports, is that something you're familiar with? And also caring. Do you think we value our carers? There's a shortage, of course, of people in the social care sector as well, so what's the answer to all of that? Get in touch with me, gbviews, gbnews.uk is my email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. I was asking you earlier on, by the way, do you think that it is the Tories that have crashed the economy? Angie is not having any of that. She was my first viewer email in tonight. She saw the tweet that Labour have put up saying the only thing that's crashing any economy around here is the incessant striking. Oh, harsh. What do you think to that? Do you agree with her or not? The reason I'm asking about this today is because the Bank of England have been forced to intervene yet again in economic affairs. They're using the term material risk, and everyone else has gone to town on it, basically. The bank has started buying up more government debt, they say, to help with stability. Kevin Craig, this is a dream come true for Labour, and they've wasted no time at all. Straight out, I showed one of the tweets earlier on saying, and it's the mantra that seems to be getting trotted out, that the Tories have crashed the economy. Have they really?
Well, Angie won't like this, Michelle, but it wasn't strikers that caused the markets to get spooked with the mini-budget. It wasn't strikers that caused the markets to interest rate rises to rise generally, causing mortgage rates to go up. Now, some folks, including your good self, say, oh, no, the massive increase in mortgage rates, the 40% of mortgages removed from the market, almost 2 million people coming off a 2-year fix, probably going to pay up to 500 quid a month. Some say, no, this has got nothing to do with the government. But actually, when he made the announcement, the Chancellor, of unfunded tax cuts, economists of all persuasions say that that was the trigger for the increase in interest rates. Now, it's absolutely true, which is very reasonable, that more broadly globally we have been behind other nation-states in our interest rate rises, something you said recently. But Labour, of course, are going to attack the government because an election is within 2 years. And the good lady on your left there will no doubt pile in a minute.
But is it a true attack, though? Because would you regard our economy as one that's crashed? I wouldn't.
I would regard the last 2 to 3 weeks since Kwasi Kwarteng made a budget with no reference to the Office of Budget Responsibility to be a deeply unstable time in our economy.
Yeah, but has it crashed? Has our economy crashed?
It's in real dire straits as a direct result of government intervention.
Has it crashed?
Crashed? Well, how do you define a crash?
Well, I would say things like, for example, the unemployment rates came out today. We've had the lowest levels of unemployment as announced today in 50 years. I would say that that's an indication of an economy that hasn't crashed. We're not in a recession. I would say that if we were, that would potentially be an economy that's crashed. We're not in that situation. GDP is better than it was expected to be. So I personally wouldn't say that we're in an economic crash. And I think that what's happening at the moment is that, understandably, Labour are kind of going on this attack after the Tories, but they're doing it in ways that they don't need to.
Well,
because, go on.
Well, just to respond to you, Michelle, I think in a situation where the average mortgage rate increase has gone up for £500 a month as a result of what a politician has done, that will feel to millions of GB viewers and listeners like the economy is crashing. And if it was done by Labour, my word, would we not hear the end of it?
I'll bring Jackie in just a sec. But
she's very slick, though.
She's very
wait
good.
For it.
Let me ask you this, though. You say about these interest rate rises happening and you're pinning it all on this mini-budget. Come on now. Interest rates have needed to rise for a period of time. We've not risen in the speed and the gravitas in which other countries have. And what was my other point? I was going to make a really good other point.
Let me
I've forgotten my other point.
Listen, I actually congratulated you and agreed with you on your broader remark about global interest rates. But come on, everybody.
Oh, my other point, I just remembered. It's
what
popped into my head. Profiteering by banks. Why are they so very, very quick to hike their products' interest rates up on things like mortgages, but so very, very slow to apply the same interest rate rises to things like their savings accounts?
It was working. It was working very well before Kamikaze got stuck in.
Kamikaze. Jacqueline, come on, sort it out. Your thoughts?
Well, of course, the economy hasn't crashed. Of course, we've got turmoil across the globe, and particularly in Europe, notwithstanding what's happened with a war in Europe and basically Vladimir Putin holding a lot of Western Europe to ransom. In addition to that, I think a gentle reminder that for more than 2 years, we had lockdowns that cost this economy around £400 billion, which we managed to sustain. And that was without all the additional things that we had to do during COVID. You know, as a businesswoman, many businesses were literally hanging on by their fingernails. A lot of them actually lost their businesses too, and that was in the private sector. But what we were able to do, because of the strength of our economy, we have about 6 million public sector workers in this country, ranging from the police, obviously government departments, NHS and everything. And not one person during the entire time lost their job, which is good, because we wanted to make sure that when we came out of the other end of this, that we had the public sector still intact. But notwithstanding that, it really did affect, obviously, businesses, and very often small businesses, despite furlough. So when Kwasi came forward with his mini-budget, I was delighted. And the reason I was delighted, because things like abolishing IR35, which maybe a lot of viewers really don't know about that much, but it really does affect small businesses. Small and medium businesses are the engine room of this economy. They account for about 82% of the growth that we will get. It's the very big companies, obviously, that we all know about, but we forget about their supply side and their contractors. The fact that we're not going to increase corporation tax, again, you're looking at that's good for business and hopefully more inward investment. The investment zones, the new low tax investment zones, are obviously very welcome. And I have a very close friend who's just in the process, actually, of buying a house, and she's saved probably £3,000 or £4,000 on stamp duty. National insurance. People think national insurance, oh, it's just the employee paying the national insurance. But the fact that we haven't raised it means, you know, it's normally about twice the amount that the employers are paying. So those businesses who are hoping to carry on recruiting are not going to be burdened with additional NI. And so, obviously, the 1p... No, I'm going to carry on.
I haven't interrupted you. I've been very good.
The 1p
Michelle's
increase, the 1p decrease in income tax is also welcome. So I acknowledge timing is everything in politics, and I think we all accept that. But I do not believe that when he made that announcement, when he made the announcement on the mini-budget, which was, obviously, it was discussed in the House of Commons, I actually welcomed it. Now, we can't account for what markets will do, but one point you did raise is when markets wobble, when markets do go, you know, hell for leather, we have speculators. So there will be speculators that have done very well out of all of this. And notwithstanding, we are still, in the G7 countries, the second lowest with, I think, debt. Means that we still have an economy, despite all of these things that have really rocked the boat over these last couple of years, where we can actually go out and borrow when we need to, which we've had to do with the energy crisis. And to be able to borrow, you know, £150 billion, no economy has crashed when it can borrow £150 billion to help with everyone in this country towards their energy bills, which we have little control over, notwithstanding the prices of energy are determined on the world markets.
So I did say that she was very slick, and I didn't try and interrupt. But what I will say is the stamp duty savings have been wiped out by the increase in mortgage costs. Speculators have done well. Many of them, forgive me for pointing this out, are big funders of the Conservative Party. The lockdowns, this is not the topic for today. The topic for today is the incompetence of that announcement that has led to hundreds of pounds on mortgages. And I'll tell you this, and maybe we agree on this. The government is not going to be able to wait for 2 more weeks to tell us what its plans are. Okay, that's going to bring more instability in the markets, and then there needs to be details brought forward much more quickly, because it's fiendishly complicated, but behind the scenes in the markets, there's all sorts of movements going on to protect pension funds who are invested in certain directions. And this idea that the Conservative Party somehow speaks for small businesses, unlike many of the hedge fund Tory party speculators who have made a lot of money from this crisis. I started a business from a living room that's employed hundreds of people and made millions. So we don't need any lessons from those folk. What we do know is that loads of our employees are going to be paying hundreds of pounds more every month, and I'm just saying it didn't need to happen. Do you think Kwasi did a good job?
Well, first of all, you're wrong, because something was going to happen. And what had happened, if we go back a short while, we know the Fed in the US were hiking up interest rates. We know that across Europe, they've been hiking up interest rates. If I've got a criticism of the Bank of England, and I'm very pleased that it is independent, it was made independent some years ago, is we have sat on interest rates of 0.25 and 0.5 for mortgage purposes. I remember having my mortgage, along with many, many others, during the 80s and the 90s. Mine was about 8%. And it varied. It went to 6% at one stage. There were times when mortgage rates went up to 15%. And people who are older than me and as old as me, they'll remember that. So what I would like to see is the fact that they kept, in my view, this artificially low platform for so long, I think lulled people also into a false sense of security, including maybe building societies and banks. We bailed the banks out not that many years ago, and people will remember who are watching this programme. So, you know, it's about time that the banks also came to the fore, and the building societies. It will be that there will be a number of people, of their customers, who will have increases in their mortgage. And I would like to see the fact that we've helped them out in the past, that they're coming forward to their customers and they're saying, OK, Mr. and Mrs. whoever or Miss whoever, we're going to look and anticipate that your mortgage, and this is what we're going to do to help you. They can look at things like, because we know that the oil prices are likely to drop, we may not need to borrow as much, by the way, over the next 6 months. And what they can do is they could, for example, say, Michelle, we've looked at it, it could be that, we've estimated, why don't we give you a 6-month holiday in repaying your mortgage? Why don't we look at how you're paying your interest on your mortgage? So I expect them, because they are customer savvy, and there's great competition when you're looking at lending, money lending, whether it's, as I said, mortgages or whatever, to come forward also, look outside the box and see how they can help their customers during this very difficult period.
And go on, Kevin.
I just didn't hear an answer to the question there of whether or not you think the Chancellor is doing a good job and whether he did well with that statement that caused all this.
I think the Chancellor is on the right track.
Okay.
He is on the right track. I am a small state, low-tax Tory. I want the taxes spent properly. I want more money left in people's pockets. That's what I want to see. And then the money that we do give the taxman... I mean, there are people who are on 40% top rate, and they're only middle earners, and by the time you've got national insurance coming on, you're paying nearly 50 to 60% of what you're earning, basically to the government, and then all governments, whatever political colour, they do tend to think it's theirs, and it's not really theirs, it's ours. Yeah, as I said, I acknowledge maybe the timing could have been better, particularly when they were talking about that reduction of top rate. I want to see us come back to 40% top rate as soon as it's feasibly possible. America, the top rate of tax is 37%, and you're only paying 37% if you're earning between $250,000 and $500,000. Ireland is 40% top rate. And when Ireland, the Republic, were reducing their taxes over the years, the EU weren't too happy because they don't like too much competition within the EU states in terms of levels of tax. And they brought in, with low corporation tax, loads of investment. So the whole thing is, if you can bring in the investment, if you can start the growth going, because we have been sitting on this plateau, then that's what we need to do. It's not going to be easy, and I don't think the public out there think it is easy, but I think they do understand the huge issues that we have gone through, the turbulent times that we have gone through as a nation over the last couple of years, and I am very happy with the path that Kwasi Kwarteng is taking and that the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, wants to move along.
Okay.
We've got to kickstart this economy, and we can't keep sitting in our laurels thinking something's going to happen, because it's not.
I commend your loyalty, right? But just as a reality check, if a Labour Chancellor had done, and a Labour Prime Minister, what these two had done a few weeks ago, you two this evening would be absolutely hammering them. But you are very articulate, that's why you're such a successful person. But, you know, I think a lot of people will not think after 12 years they understand. They'll say, this lot have had long enough and they've run out of ideas and we don't trust their judgment.
Just my concluding point. A Labour Chancellor wouldn't have done this. They wouldn't have done this. And don't forget, it was
a Labour Chancellor,
40p.
that's it. A Labour Chancellor would not have decreased taxes for the wealthiest. Disaster.
They wouldn't have been reducing tax and
Bankers'
corporation
bonuses while people are on the breadline. Can't take that.
Corporation tax. And don't forget, when Labour came in 1997, for the next 12 years, they kept the top rate of income tax to 40p. The lower your top rate of tax is, the more revenue you will get into the Treasury and the more you can invest on other things. It's not the right time at the moment. They'll look at that again in the future, and I hope when it's feasible, we will bring that top rate down and we will try and make sure that the public are going to keep more of the money that they earn.
A couple of my viewers are pointing out, saying, how come no one's pointing out to the Labour guy, that means you, that it was Labour that pretty much bankrupts the country?
Well,
oh, yeah.
If I tell you what Labour did, Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling, and you know, if anyone's got the time, I'll talk about this for weeks about the financial crisis of 8.
Don't do it for weeks, but do it for about 30 seconds.
I'll do it for as long as Jackie had. But basically,
he had COVID in Ukraine. He had
basically, yes, and no one denies COVID Ukraine. But that was a very different crisis. We are talking about the fact that hundreds, if thousands, possibly millions of listeners and viewers are paying larger mortgages as a direct result of the actions of politicians. And I'm merely seeking to hold... Yes, well, in my opinion, and you've had a lot of airtime tonight, in my opinion, that's what happened. And not just me, neutral economists from across our country. You are remarkably generous to Kwasi Kwarteng, much more so than I hear than many others in the Houses of Parliament.
Well, there you go. Who's this? Someone here is saying, what's your name? Carl, you say, I'm a mortgage broker and a financial advisor, and interest rates are high and currency down all over the UK. He's saying markets dropped because the US increased their interest rates on the 21st, which made the dollar stronger on the 22nd. That's why the pound dropped on the 23rd, along with the yen and the euro. That is why he says the rates have gone up. And he makes a very key point at the end here, Carl. You know your onions, you do. He's saying the Bank of England were too slow to have initially raised interest rates. I agree with you, as does Jackie.
I don't.
He's saying Labour is trying to scare people into a downturn.
No, I mean, look, it's not... Labour under Keir Starmer does not want to scare people in our country. Okay?
What?
It doesn't. Labour is just pointing out and holding a 12-year-old government to account. That's all. And my opinion, in differing to Carl and you two, is that unfunded tax cuts announced by the Chancellor with no reference to the OBR cause absolute turmoil in our markets, and that ordinary people are paying.
Labour politicians have been practically hysterical, along with some of the mainstream media, BBC, Sky. I mean, I don't know how they sleep at night. They're spending the entire time ratcheting up the hysteria on this. So, you know, they're talking about, oh, look at the reaction from the market and all of this. My goodness. I mean, it's just been absolutely unbelievable.
Briefly, Malcolm, he's emailed in. He's blaming this on the IMF's intervention. He's saying it was the IMF interfering, which spooked a lot of the market. Do you think the IMF was right to come in as and when they did?
The IMF, there was no reason at all for the IMF to come in. We were not borrowing money from the International Monetary Fund, which was set up post-war to help sort of third world countries and whatever. The trouble is, the IMF's turned into a little bit political body, and then it put forward this statement, and it starts talking about inequality in the UK. This is the International Monetary Fund, which is now the president, is an ex-commissioner from the European Union. And I was just astounded. Absolutely astounded.
Why?
There are countries in this world countries in this world that don't even have a democracy, never mind equality. And there they are commenting on, I mean, I just thought it was unbelievable. I think the thing is, Labour know about the IMF because in the 70s, they had to go to the IMF to be bailed out. The IMF made a statement, but we're not going to the IMF because we don't need bailing out by the IMF.
Not
so
yet.
I think we'll just leave.
Give it a couple of weeks.
Well, we won't.
Wait
We'll leave
for
the
this
IMF
gap.
over here because I could probably go on about that for a bit longer.
I thought you were saying Labour weren't frightening people with the doom and gloom. Now you're saying that we're going to need some kind of bailout from the IMF.
Michelle, I'm pointing out that many economic commentators, for example, the head of one of the Cambridge colleges, is saying today there is a 2-week period now. We've got massive uncertainty in a vacuum where we don't know what the government's going to come out with.
Well, do you know what? Here's a little suggestion for everybody, and I know it's a very simple one, but, you know, simple ideas are often the best. If we've got a couple of weeks to fill, why don't we just relax and wait and see what happens, rather than spending every waking minute of every waking day pontificating and projecting doom and gloom? Just wait and see, everybody.
Shall I tell you why that's not possible for lots of people, Michelle?
Tell me very quickly then.
All right, a few words. It's because people who are already on the edge economically are now paying hundreds of extra pounds a month as a result of government cock-ups.
What is the normal mortgage rate at the moment? Interest rate then? Average interest rate then? You're talking about new mortgages. New mortgages, or somebody who's come to the end.
5.5.
Yeah, because 94% are fixed rate, and they're normally fixed rate for a couple of years.
1.8 million people.
But there will be a proportion
will
be coming to the end of the fixed rate.
2 million people.
So I was under the impression that you could still get, because obviously I'd made some inquiries, and they were running at 3 to 4%, depending who your lender was. But as I said, these companies that lend money also need to look how they look after their customers.
Right, well, tell me at home, because you'll be the customers. Are you trying to get a mortgage at the moment? What rates are you getting? And whose view do you share? Helen says, by the way, what crashed economy everywhere I go? It's packed pubs, restaurants, bars, hotels, you name it. She says there's money everywhere. Do you feel that though? Tell me, gbviews, gbnews.uk is the email. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about this levelling up situation. Doncaster's Sheffield Airport is due to close at the end of this month. Some say that just proves that the government doesn't care about levelling up. Does it prove that? Or is it just simple economics at play? I'll see you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock tonight with you. And keeping me company in the studio tonight, I've got the former Conservative MEP and now life peer in the House of Lords, Jacqueline Foster. Some people on my email saying you should be Prime Minister. Liking what they're hearing. And Kevin Craig, the CEO of PLMR Communications Agency. I've not had anyone emailing
They're not
yet
saying that, Michelle.
saying
They're
that you
saying
should
a
be the
lot
Prime
worse.
Minister. If there is anyone out there that thinks that Kevin should be Prime Minister as well, get in touch as well, you know, just to even it all out a little bit. GBviews at gbnews.uk. No one's told me I should be the Prime Minister
I have.
either.
I often
I'm in the same
hear
camp
that.
I
as
think
you.
we'll vote for you.
Yeah.
Oh, a good on. Who would want that job? Who on earth would want to?
Exactly.
Yeah, who would want to be? The only reason I'd want to be Prime Minister, and I'll be completely honest, is so I could make my millions on the speaking circuit
Don't
afterwards.
forget, I'm a Tory MP, I'm a Tory peer, and I was a Tory MEP. I mean, that's tough. Without being a Prime Minister.
Well, we did a topic last night, actually, just about how nasty politics is at the moment. I've got to be honest, irrespective of the side of the fence, I don't envy people in politics at the moment because I think it's got very nasty, very unpleasant.
Agreed.
And I think, actually, some of our leaders could actually lead by example, whether it's, you know, the scum comments from Labour, we had the detest comments from SNP.
I think it's outrageous when any politician, I don't care if they're in the Labour Party or SNP, wherever, calls other people scum. I've never understood it, and if you love and respect this country, you should welcome...
Well, we've never called Labour scum.
No.
Never, ever.
No,
Or
well...
Lib Dems.
There you go. I digress.
Anyway,
I
back to your
digress.
airport.
Back to my airports. Yeah, I was ranting in the breaks, that was anyway, about one of my recent flight experience when I got kicked out. I basically got my last flight of the day cancelled and stranded. But again, that's another story for another day. I can't wait to have that rant. The reason I was talking about it because we're focusing on airports. Doncaster, Sheffield Airport. Are you a user of it? My family are. And if you don't know about it, basically it's set to close at the end of this month. Many people are really upset by this. This is a local airport, and now many people are saying this proves that the government are not serious about levelling up. They're saying if it was an airport, say, I don't know, Luton or whatever, it would never be allowed to close like this. Is that true, do you think? Is this a sign, this Doncaster Sheffield Airport closing? It's going to have a change of use. It's going to become basically like a warehousing site instead. Is it reflective of the government not caring about levelling up?
Not at all. It's nothing to do with levelling up. This is not about levelling up. This is about a business which has been very badly affected over the last 2.5 years. This is COVID-related, and it's affected all airports. It's affected the travel industry enormously. It affected the entire supply chain throughout hospitality, everything. And we knew there was an anticipation, I think we all knew, to get back to the sort of numbers, even though the airports look busy at the moment, it was going to take a couple of years. And very sadly and very tragically, because I'm a great supporter, I mean, I worked out of Heathrow when I started my career, but obviously from my neck of the woods, I have Liverpool, John Lennon and Manchester. As you said, we obviously had, across the Pennines. And this is a result, really, of... I think it's not. I don't think it's about investment or anything like that. It's. I think Wizz Air were one of the airlines that flew in, and they've now stopped. And they're at the mercy of they're at the mercy of things, really. A lot of these very small carriers. And I think at the moment you've only got TUI. I think only TUI was left, and TUI, of course. And these are holiday type airlines, so they tend to do most of their business in the summer. The difference is with a lot of other airports. They may have schedules that are sort of fairly equal throughout the year. So they're not dependent on just one part of the year. Now, I don't know whether Doncaster deals much with freight. East Midlands, for example, I remember many years ago, there was Birmingham and East Midlands, and there was quite a lot of passenger traffic from East Midlands. And then that gradually sort of disappeared, and it's now very freight-orientated. So I don't know what the answer is, because people say, well, could the government put money in? Well, it's owned by Peel Ports, and they've obviously made a decision to say that we can't carry on doing that. And then you're in a position, whichever government, and they say, well, can we have some money from government to put in to keep it going? But the thing is, even if you were doing that, you've got to have the traffic out of it. You've got to be able to have the airlines who are prepared to put their business model in there and their business in there, and then the whole of the supply chain. It's not just an aeroplane, it's everything else that goes with that. to keep an airport running. And I think it's really sad, actually.
Before I bring Kevin in the first PMQs that Liz Truss did, she was asked about this, about would you save the airport? And she said, and I quote directly, we will protect this airport and its infrastructure. See, and I look at that and I think, well, actually, the airport and its infrastructure is a private enterprise. And I found that to be a very bold statement, because that's not an ambiguous statement. That is a clear cut. We will protect this airport and its infrastructure. And to put that on the record, and then to let it or allow it or whatever market forces, and for it then to close, that's why I think a lot of people feel disappointment, because they'll say they had their expectations set that it was going to be saved by central government, and then hasn't been.
I mean, I can't recall sort of hearing that statement, because I would have had a red flag go up. And sometimes when you've got these questions in the House and, they're bouncing backwards and forwards, and they obviously try and do as much research, I think, in advance to make sure they can answer something reasonably coherently. I'm not sure why she said that particularly, but maybe at that time, when that discourse took place, maybe there was a possible chance that they could keep it going. I don't know. So I can't really comment that much further. As I said, it'd be great if they could come to... I understand that the local authorities are involved and there's Labour MPs there and whatever. And I hope that they can maybe find a way. But I think they would really genuinely, Michelle, have to get more airlines to guarantee to come in and start operating, and not just next summer, but to be able to start some sort of, certainly some sort of business during the winter too.
Kevin?
I think
so I don't know.
a lot of the points about the economics of airports, I've worked for some in my professional career, are very valid. I think you're right, Michelle. The problem is hopes were raised. There was a very clear commitment given. Labour MPs did write to the Transport Secretary asking him to use something called the Civil Contingencies Act to keep the airport open. And this could have been done. There are ways. It was based on what the Prime Minister has said, and I think that's caused the problem. Hopes were raised. The economics of airports, absolutely agree, but the government could have stepped in, and it's decided not to. And I think, again, to be charitable and open-minded, airports bring economic growth, they bring jobs, and that's why people are questioning the commitment.
But the owners of this airport, they'd come out and said they didn't want to take on, essentially, public funds for a proposition that ultimately wasn't financially viable.
Well, they're not without blame, Michelle. I mean, if you're going to go into these ventures with a profit motive, which I'm a big supporter of, fine, but you can't then, it's not good for business owners, small or large, when folks only want to run a business when there's easy money to be made, and then they lose their nerve at the first
but I don't think this was about easy money particularly. Nobody gets involved in the aviation sector to make easy money, because they don't really, because they're at the behest of the world markets and fuel and all of this sort of stuff. As I said, I think they tried to get another owner. They tried to get another owner, but it didn't happen. But as I said, I think the primary cause of this, unfortunately, has come through from what happened with COVID.
With COVID?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, of course, COVID was difficult, but here you have a situation...
COVID was... decimated...
I know. We all know that.
The airline
we all know that. But what I'm saying is the Prime Minister, your Prime Minister, if I may say, and our Prime Minister, but your party's, your leader, said, we will protect this airport, but they didn't.
Well, as I said, I didn't...
What do you think about the whole levelling up agenda? Because there's a lot of people in the north. I'm a passionate northerner.
You are.
And I like this phrase, levelling up. But sometimes I think, well, what do you even actually mean by that? What does it mean?
Well, my reading and my work takes me around the country is that people in communities, many of whom who voted Tory for the first time, a lot of it was based around Brexit. A lot of it was in the belief that their lives would be noticeably, measurably better. They felt unlistened to on immigration. They felt unlistened to on chances for their children. And levelling up, Michelle, people are going to have to need to feel in all these constituencies that this government has made their life better. Better schools, NHS, a better experience, better streets. And if not, it won't be the opinions of us three that decides this. It will be the ballot box.
See, I'm very simplistic on my view about levelling up. And if I was to say what levelling up means to To me, levelling up means that young people shouldn't have to be in the situation that I was in. So I got to the point where I wanted to embark on a career. And for me personally, the only opportunities that I had, you know, like decent financial propositions attached to them were outside of my hometown. So then I was put to put to the test. Do you stay with your family or do you go earn the money? Like, what do you actually do? And I think that any young person, if they want to stay in and around their hometown, they should be prosperous career opportunities existing in those cities. So that they don't need to leave. That's what I think, to me, levelling up.
I do think there has been a huge improvement in terms of the cities. I mean, I came from a very famous city, and at 20 years old, I decided I wasn't going to stay. I could have had a career in Liverpool, but I didn't want to. I wanted to travel, and I wanted to go into the airline industry, and I got on my bike, if you remember that phrase, and I went to London. And at the time, we had Liverpool, a very little airport at the time that was around, and it was very limited. So the difficulty with it, you're right, you want to try and get the investment into many of these areas, but then it very much does depend on what you then would personally want to do. I mean, what we do know is we have a lot of kids who go to universities, and then they'll go to university, they'll be born in one place, they'll go to another place, and they often stay in that city or in the surrounds there. And so I don't think, I think there's a genuine support. We all want to try and make sure towns and cities are levelled up, so to speak, and people don't really have to go to the southeast or London if they want to do many things. And I think there have been massive improvements and changes I've seen over the last 30 years, definitely. And, of course, it's about transport links as well. So you've got to make sure you get in the transport links as well, because people like to commute if they don't want to actually move into a city. They still want to maybe live an hour out or whatever. And, of course, you've found much more commuting over the last 30 or 40 years. People didn't commute as much. And that's just, you know, it's the way the world moves on.
Let me know your thoughts at home, by the way. What does levelling up mean to you? I've explained what it means to me. Also, be careful what you wish for sometimes, I think, because if you want levelling up, I hope that levels of house prices don't hit the north. Anyone will know the difference between the house price in London versus, say, for example, Hull or somewhere like that. That is one aspect you wouldn't want to head up north, I can assure you.
Absolutely.
Right, it's going to take a quick break. Lots of you getting in touch on that last topic, by the way. A few of you now saying, what about Prestwick Airport in the SNP? You don't seem to be happy with what happened to that one. Maybe that's a topic for another day. Right. Well, they're not happy about it. A mess is what you guys are calling it. A waste of money are what you guys are calling it. And a couple of other things that I can't repeat on Tea Time Television. Right, it's going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about caring. Do we care about our carers? Tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, and my panel, the former Conservative MEP, now life peer in the House of Lords, Jacqueline Foster, and Kevin Craig, who's the CEO of the PLMR Communications Agency. Lots of you getting in touch about airports. Michelle, how come no one cared when they closed Manston Airport in Kent a few years ago? No one really seemed to bother then, you're saying. Other people are saying, Michelle, how many airports does the North need? Do you know, I didn't realise this statistic. There's 40 airports in the UK. I did not realise it was 40, did you?
I didn't know it was that high, Michelle.
Well, you probably did realise that, because this is your field.
A lot that you don't really sort of, you know, doesn't trip off your tongue. But...
Yeah, I do confess I've never spent many seconds of my life counting up the airports in the UK, but when I did today, I was quite astonished that it was that high, 40. Right, let's move on, shall we? Talk about caring. Tens of thousands of carers have now left the industry, and experts are saying we are in an absolute crisis. Their words, not mine. Apparently, there's nearly 200,000 jobs to fill, and England alone is expected to need about 500,000 more care staff by 2035. Kevin, it gets me pondering all of this. When you look at carers, a lot of them earn minimum wage, a lot of them travel from job to job and don't get paid for the travelling time in between. And I kind of think, do you think we value caring as a profession, carers?
We don't. I mean, I've worked with the care sector and care companies for many years. I've used care for my parents. We don't. The answer of it is money, I'm afraid. They're undervalued, they're underpaid. Councils, who've been subject to, you know, a decade plus of funding reductions, provide a lot of care. They're struggling for money. And many private providers, not all, but some, don't look after their staff well enough. It's an undervalued profession. I've thought for years we should have something like a national care service similar to the NHS and elevate this profession to make it...
What would that look like?
Well, it would just look like Royal College-style recognition for carers, increased starting salaries and a greater appreciation of care as a career that you could go into to achieve your life goals and ambitions, as well as doing something very purposeful.
I quite like that idea. Do you like that idea? Is it a good one? Would it fly?
Actually, I do. I think it's sort of started off as a bit of a hodgepodge type of job to go into, because, you know, as I said earlier, if you're going back, you know, 2 or 3 generations, and you still see it on the continent, I think, even more than, certainly more than here. You know, if you had older parents, they'd often live with the rest of the family. And then, of course, we became mobile, and then you found the kids then moved off and went around the country for a different job. And then you found more and more older people, and then going into retirement and then becoming probably maybe a little bit frail or whatever, finding it difficult to stay in their own home. So I think it's just society has changed hugely. So I think it's sort of managed okay. And then the care homes were set up. I mean, about 85% of the care homes are private. And then the rest of them are run by the local authorities. And so in terms of the sort of pay and conditions, I think it's sort of been left on a bit of an ad hoc basis rather than anything structured. Now, I'm not saying that there should be a national structure in place because, you know, I don't think you need to do anything like that. But I think if you start with where the care homes are, I think they should be paying a proper wage. I think the conditions should be good. And you do get a lot of people. And they do stay and they'll work in that care home for many years. I've visited care homes. I mean, don't forget, I was a member of the European Parliament for years, so I went down around different ones in the Northwest. And I have to say, some of them were absolutely fabulous, but they cost a lot of money. And then I'm thinking, well, you're charging the client, you know, thousands a week, and you seem to be paying the staff very little. So I think that, you know, that's certainly a consideration. I think where also some of the shortfalls come in, unfortunately, again, and I don't want to harp back, but it happened, but a decision was made about mandatory vaccination for care workers during COVID. I mean, it stopped being progressed on to NHS workers because we'd have been in a real problem. And I never, ever agreed with that, frankly. And we obviously found out since, and we knew at the time, that even if you were vaccinated, you could still contract or you could still actually pass on this virus. And I don't think the care workers were lax in any event. And there were certainly people who weren't able to have that vaccine and they lost their jobs. Now, the trouble is you then had a whole chunk of people who were taken out of the market. So even when things calmed down and we started to get people back, people then found different jobs. So we would have lost some really experienced care workers. The ones that roam around, as we know, they go to 25 minutes for somebody's house and 45. It happened with my mum, who was in social care. Again, they're generally local authority care workers. Now, I accept, you know, local authorities can be stretched, but they waste an awful lot of money. And they've all been given extra funds over the years in terms for social care. Oh, they have by central government. They certainly have. And so I'm not saying that they wouldn't like more at all, but there really is no excuse then to keep the wage levels so low because they're still paying in the local authority homes, people are still paying towards it, that people feel as though that they have to leave.
I mean, I would have to disagree with you that funding cuts to local authorities are not linked to falling care standards. And whilst local authorities directly might only provide about 15%, they in many cases set the fees and then subcontract to the providers.
Oh, I agree.
And so, you know, there is an issue with money, and that really is what it's going to take. And just if we could try and move forward and get political consensus, because viewers and listeners might remember when at the tail end of the last Labour government, radical plans came forward to try and fix this. Because the Conservative Party were in attack mode, a bit like you said Labour were earlier, it got called Labour's death tax. Now, actually, we're going to have a grown-up debate about care in this country because, you know, I think our personal experience and our views and listeners is it's not working. This really important report today says we've got a huge issue.
Yeah, one of the challenges is, like you're pointing out, wasn't it a dementia tax or something that May tried to introduce and she got a criticism for it? One of the challenges is we all concede that social care perhaps is broken to some extent. And then when there does seem to be the sense of, right, put your hands in your pockets then to pay for it, then there does seem to be a bit of resistance. But to Jacqueline's point about the vaccine mandates, tens of thousands of people were booted out of their jobs for not having those vaccines. I personally would say that if you were one of them and you want your job back, some of them won't want their job back, but if you did, I think they should be rehired.
Absolutely.
Well, I would, there's a debate to be had around that, but I would also like us to talk about the fact that I'm afraid there were mistakes made where people were sent back into care homes.
Yeah, but hang on, come back to the question that I'm posing. The vaccine mandates, if you were kicked out of your care profession and you want to come back, don't you think they should be allowed back in?
Yes, for sure, because I think we're at a different phase of COVID. But the whole issue around what happened about care workers and vaccinations, I would suggest is not the answer to the bigger question about
I think it's a contributing factor, and the thing is, this widens out, if I may say, because this is why they're trying to... The NHS and care are hot political footballs, and we know that. And where we would agree, whichever side of the political spectrum, and I have said it for years along with others, unless we get this out of the political mode and we can sit down and have a conversation cross-party with everybody and say, how do we need to operationally... I mean, the NHS doesn't have a problem because of money. Most of these problems are not always money. It's the structure, it's the... I mean, the thing is... The committees that are involved, all of these things, so many things make it so complex to deliver what we need to do.
Well, Helen's been in touch, and I am a domiciliary carer in the Cheltenham area. She says, I love my job and my clients. I get paid just above minimum wage. I get paid mileage that pays for some of the fuel in my car, but not all of it. I don't get paid for the time between clients either. She's basically saying that it is just kind of getting out of hands, I think. She's saying that councils are not paying care companies enough. She worries that going forward, care companies perhaps will only start accepting private clients, which is, of course, a worry for many. Archie says, I was a carer for 3 family members, one in a wheelchair, one with cancer and dementia, and a third with motor neuron disease. He says that took 30 years out of my working life. Now he has to struggle on by with restricted benefits. And I think a lot of people are in that situation where they are struggling with caring for family members as well as trying to keep a roof over their own heads. It is not an easy situation for many.
I agree with that.
And this is a conversation I think that perhaps will rumble on. But for now, Jacqueline and Kevin, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your thoughts at home as well. Coming up at 7 o'clock, Nigel Farage. Nigel, good evening to you. What have you got for us?
Michelle, thank you. This programme has been predicting for many, many months that energy may run out this winter. Our debate tonight, will the lights go out in February? We'll discuss all of that, but first, the all-important weather.
Hello again. We've seen wet weather move into the west of Scotland through the day, and it's turning cloudy with outbreaks of rain for many places during the next 24 hours. But the southeast largely avoids the rain. Here, high pressure holds on, at least at first. But further west, well, weather fronts are arriving from the Atlantic. They're the cause of the cloudy and damp weather in western Scotland, and that weather will push into Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, as well as northern and western England and Wales through the night. With the cloud thickening and those outbreaks of rain arriving, it is a mild night in the north and the west. But in central and southeastern parts of England, 5 Celsius in many places, even a touch lower in some sheltered spots. So a chilly start for the Midlands, eastern England, but a bright start here. And we keep some sunny spells into the afternoon, although clouds will tend to build. Elsewhere, that mild but damp start for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy rain for a time through the central belt and southern Scotland. Those heavy bursts of rain push into northern England, clearing Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brighter skies here, 13 or 14 Celsius. 17 Celsius in the southeast with some sunshine in the afternoon. But the cloudy zone in the middle, I think, will make it feel a bit cooler than the last couple of days, for example. That cloud bringing some heavy showers late afternoon, early evening through northern England, the Midlands, Wales. But those showers, as they push southeastwards, tend to peter out. And, well, by dawn on Thursday, looks like clear skies once again for many places. As a result, in the north in particular, it's going to be a chilly start to the day.